Good afternoon, everyone. If I could bring you to order this time. F1. 1 minute, we just have some feedback in the room. All right. The first item is a declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none, we'll take a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Joining me in the council chamber today is Deputy Clerk Chris Bantock, Chief Administrative Officer Joan Thompson, Deputy Mayor Martin Ritzma, and in the building with us is City Clerk Tatiana Defoe. At this time, we'll go to adoption of the minutes, and I'll turn it over to the clerk.
Through your worship, as noted, item 3 is adoption of the minutes, and there is a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting of council of the corporation of the city of Stratford dated May 10th be adopted as printed.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Anderson. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried.
Item 4 is adoption of the addendum, and just prior to today's meeting, an addendum was circulated, and there is a motion that the addendum to the regular agenda of council and standing committees dated May 25th to add receipt of correspondence and a delegation to item 5.1 on the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee agenda be added.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Seban that the addenda be adopted. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried.
Item 5 is report of the Committee of the Whole in camera session, and item 5.1 from the May 10th session under the Municipal Act as amended, a matter concerning the following item was considered. Now is a sale to Southwest Build Co. Limited, and there is a motion that the corporation of the City of Stratford hereby consents to the sale of part of Lot 4, Plan 44M-38, designated as Part 1 on Plan 44R-5305, and part of Block 31, Plan 44M-38, designated as Part 3 on Plan 44R-5305, all in the City of Stratford, County of Perth, in the Wright Business Park to Southwest Build Co. Limited.
Moved by Councillor Gaffney, seconded by Councillor Clifford. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried.
Item 5.2, just prior to today's regular council meeting, the Committee of the Whole in camera session was held to consider matters relating to the following. First, relating to proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land by the municipality or local board. A matter relating to personal matters about an identifiable individual and labor relations or employee negotiations. And the third matter relating to personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal employees or local board employees. And at the in-camera session, direction was given on all items.
Thank you.
Item 6, hearings of deputations and presentations. There are none scheduled. So moving to item 7, orders of the day. Item 7.1 is a resolution regarding financial statements and commentary for Festival Hydro Inc. Scott Knappman, Chief Executive Officer, and Allison Conrad, Chief Financial Officer of Festival Hydro, are in attendance to present the report. And the first motion listed on your agenda is that the presentation by Scott Knappman and Allison Conrad be heard.
Moved by Councillor Burbach and seconded by Councillor Ingram that Mr. Knappman, Ms. Conrad be heard. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. I'll welcome Mr. Knappman and Ms. Conrad and turn the meeting over to them. You're on mute, Mr. Knappman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. First, let me have the pleasure to introduce Allison Conrad. She recently joined Festival Hydro as our CFO and brings a great deal of utility experience to the organization. So we're really pleased to have her on board. One comment I'd like to do just before I jump into a presentation, I noted in the resolutions and the management reports for a period ending, it says 2020. I believe that should read 2021 on all 4 reports. So let me start off by saying you have 4 reports in front of you. 2 are for Festival Hydro Inc., the utility, the power utility, and 2 are for Festival Hydro Services Inc. Rather than reiterate what's in the packages, the commentary and the numbers, we'd be pleased to take any questions you may have, but I was just going to speak to some of the financial highlights of that, if that's all right with everyone. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please do so.
Okay, so last year obviously was a year that created a lot of uncertainty for everybody, and our business was no different. We saw quite a shift in our consumption patterns of the power, a lot more shifted towards home as people began to work from home and study from home, and small businesses were closed, and so were some of the larger factories. We saw that more in the beginning of the year in the March timeframe, and then it got a little bit better on the large side as the year went on, but we continued to see high consumption on that. So with that uncertainty, the company took steps to contain its costs. So overall, our revenues came in pretty much on budget for the year, our distribution revenues. And I refer to distribution revenues because we really see 2 revenues. If you recall our business model, we sell our distribution services where we distribute the energy. But the energy itself, which appears on the bills we do, we actually flow that through. So we don't recognize that as income. That's one is offset as we pay off. So our business model is we receive the revenues on that. So our distribution revenues came in at 11.6 million, which was pretty much on budget, which I think is very good given what the year was like. And that was pretty much on par, slightly ahead of what was last year in 2019. From a cost side, we did do cost containment because of the uncertainty. We weren't sure what was going to happen to our revenues. So we reduced costs by about 4% on the year and about 2% over the previous year. So 4% on budget. So they came in about 6 million, which resulted in our net income target, which is after tax, but before the swap, the interest rate swap. But on the net income number, we came in about 9% above budget. So I think that's a significant result, and I think the management team at Festival Hydro has done a good job to deliver on that. It's a little bit less than what it was in 2019 by about 4%. On the Q1 numbers, unless there's any questions on the 2020 numbers, I'll move on to the Q1 results for 2021.
Don't see any hands at this time, Mr. Natman, so you can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Q1 results, and it's early in the year, and there are always some timing issues around budgets around this time of year as the year tends to unfold. We're basically on budget, on target for our revenues. We've had about 2.9 million in revenue, which is what we had budgeted for. Budgeting, we had done a blend of 2019, 2020, trying to understand what those patterns might look like. So far, our budgeting model seems to have been working out. It's slightly higher than it was in 2019 at this time, but very, very slightly. From a cost perspective, we continue to maintain our costs downward. We had budgeted about 1.6 million. We're right now tracking about 1.5, so about 4 million under, or 4% under our costs as we continue to keep that down. Again, though, this is there could be pricing pressures that we're seeing in supply chains because of COVID. So we're actively trying to manage those costs and continue to contain them. It's also about 5% less than what it was in 2019. From a net income perspective, we're about 7% higher than what we had budgeted for at this point. We had budgeted 554K. We came in around 593. This time of year in 2019, we would have been tracking about 404. So we're quite a bit higher, about 47% higher than we were in 2019 at this point in the year. Is there any questions on the Q1 year-to-date results?
No, sir.
Okay, so I will move on to Festival Hydro Services, which is the non-regulated affiliate to Festival Hydro and operates largely under the brand Rhizome. Revenues in 2020 for Rhizome, or for Festival Hydro Services Inc., came in about 1.3. We had budgeted 1.4, so we're about 7% below what we had targeted there, and just slightly less than what it was in 2019. 2019 was 1.3, so about 1% less. A lot of this is attributed to part of the income from the business is from doing activities like consulting, and we had vacancies that we couldn't fill, so they were offset by lower costs. So our expenses came in at 736,000 against a budget of 942, again, largely because of containing costs and also resourcing vacancies. So we came in 22% below what we had anticipated in the budget, and we're about 15% where we were in 2019 at this point in the year. From a net income perspective, our net income, because we have been managing costs, our net income results are 141K against a budget of 78 at this point in time. So we're about 78% ahead of our targeted budget number, and we're also about 44% higher than we were year-over-year growth if we look at 2019, which would have been about 97K at this point in the year. Are there any questions on Festival Hydro Services, Inc. 2020 results?
No, sir.
Okay. So moving on to Q1 results of 2021. We had budgeted 360K for revenue. So far, we've tracking about 315K, so we're about 12% below budget. On that, again, we are still having vacancies and some challenges in filling positions, but lately we've had some very strong response and expected those would be filled very soon. It's about 5% below what it was in 2019. Cost side, again, because we are containing our costs and we have the vacancies, our budget was 207K. We're tracking at about 180K. So we're about 13% below on costs. And comparing that year over year at this time, would have been 211K. So we're about 14% below where we were in 2019 on cost side. So the bottom line is the net income is coming in at year to date. The budget was 48K. We're tracking at 31K. So we're about 37% below where we thought we would be on net income. However, that's still about 39% higher than it was this time in 2019, year over year. Is there any questions on our year-to-date Q1 results for Festival Hydro Services, Inc.?
Any questions? Seeing none. Anything further, Mr. Knappman?
No, that was my report, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Is a member of council wishing to move the resolutions found on page 3 under item 7.1? Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Beattie. Discussion. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I just had a question. I don't know if it would be the last paragraph on each of them, 7.1 and 7.2. I think they're identical. Would it be appropriate to ask Mr. Knappman about that piece of it?
Please do.
Okay. I guess I just feel that, and I don't know if this is standard because I know that last year I made a comment about it as well, but I feel it just has the feeling that it's too all-encompassing and too much of a blanket statement to sort of, approve, ratify, and confirm sort of any actions by the board and everything over the last year. So I just wondered if you could speak to that a little bit and why that's worded the way it is.
Can you tell me which paragraph you're referring to?
So it starts off that all acts, contracts, bylaws, proceedings, appointments, elections, and payments enacted, and made, done, and taken by the directors and officers of the corporation since the last annual meeting. It's the very last part of the motion.
Okay. Okay, yes, all acts. Well, this is fairly standard verbiage. We are governed by the board. So the board is the one, although the management is responsible for the operations of the business, we're governed and we have excellent governance, and I think we got an excellent board that oversees the operation itself. So I think, I think the city is very well represented by its board and its members, and the governance structure is very, very strong.
Okay, I was just looking for some clarity. Excuse me, some clarity around that. Thank you.
If there's a specific, I'm pleased to drill down on if there's a specific you'd like me to.
No, I just wondered if that was if it was sort of a common thing. It just has sort of it's just not something that at least I don't notice in any other sort of boards or anything that are overseen.
If I could, if you would like, Councillor Seven, we could refer this to the city solicitor, but I think one of the differences would be this is a corporation under the Ontario Business Corporations Act, and many of the other corporations or sorry, committees that we sit on don't operate under the OBC. So that might be the difference in verbiage. Councillor Vasilakos.
I was just going to say Spruce Lodge uses the exact same verbiage because of the way that it's structured as a corporation. And so there are some that will require this once you approve the financials for the year, and others that don't. But it is the exact language is pretty boilerplate.
So item 7.1 has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. We have had the presentation with regard to item 7.2. Would somebody be willing to make that motion? Councillor Bunting and Councillor Clifford, thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you. Councillor Seven, we've noted your concern with that paragraph, and we can have it reviewed by the city solicitor to ensure that it's in compliance. Okay. Thank you. All right, 7.3, next item.
Your worship, item 7.3 is a resolution regarding consideration of adoption of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan and Implementation Plan. And there is a staff recommendation that the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan 2021 to 2024 be adopted by Stratford City Council and forwarded to the Ministry of the Solicitor General as required by the Police Services Act 1990, and that additional resources to implement and sustain the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan as outlined in the report be referred to the 2022 budget process. And I will note staff and the consultant are on the line, and I believe there is a PowerPoint presentation to be given.
Great. Thank you. I see there's not a motion to hear the presentation. Do you wish us to make one, Mr. Foe?
Through the chair, yes, we could accept a motion to hear from Tracy, who is the consultant, Tracy Farmer, and I'll also turn it over to our Director of Social Services, along with our Chief of Police, Greg Skinner, and there are a couple other individuals also on the line.
Thank you. So just a motion to hear the delegation moved by Councillor Burback and Councillor Vasilakos. All those in favor? And that's carried. And I'll turn it over maybe to Ms. McElroy, our Director of Social Services, and Chief Skinner, and as well I want to welcome Acting Inspector Cinco from the OPP as well. So thank you. Over to you, Kim.
Thank you, through your worship. I will have Police Chief Skinner start the presentation.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, your worship. While we wait for Janine to queue up the PowerPoint. Okay, there it is. So good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and thank you for giving us some time on your agenda today to present you the final version of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan for the Perth County Partnership Municipalities and Councils. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Greg Skinner, the Chief of Police of Stratford Police Service, and joining me as part of the presentation team are Kim McElroy, Director of Social Services for Stratford, Perth County, and St. Mary's, Acting Inspector Dave Cinco, Detachment Commander for Perth County OPP, Tracy Farmer, Lead Consultant on this project from DPRA Consultants, and Janine Fast, Housing Stability Policy and Program Coordinator with Social Services. I hope you've all had some time to review the documents that we provided in advance, but if not, I hope our overview today provides you with the information that you need to adopt this plan for your municipality. The intention of today's presentation is to briefly provide you with the broad overview of the why and how of the legislative requirement for each municipality to have a community safety and well-being plan, and the extensive public and stakeholder consultations that inform the consultants to identify the priority areas, determine the goals and objectives at a high level, and then look at our next steps as we implement the plan. Items 4 and 5 is where we will be focusing today. And now I'll turn it over to Inspector Cinco to talk about the background.
Good afternoon. Each municipality is required through legislation to have a community safety and well-being plan approved and adopted by July 1st, 2021. I have been impressed with the cooperation at the municipal government level as all 6 municipalities in Perth County partnered to commit to one plan. This is no easy task at the best of times, but Tracy and her team at DPRA were able to very professionally navigate the challenges presented by a global pandemic to produce a document that recognizes the similarities and the differences among the communities represented by the partner municipalities and build in the flexibility in the plan that can meet the diversity of needs across the county. The purpose of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is not to recreate the wheel. Each of your municipalities individually and collectively have incredible people performing amazing work to support your communities. The purpose of this plan is to be the overarching plan that coordinates those activities happening now, leverages existing resources, shares best practices, and identifies and addresses any gaps in service delivery. We live in a fast-paced world where issues come at us from all directions, and it is easy to get pulled into the weeds and get stuck in paralysis by analysis. The intent of this plan is to provide a strategic, coordinated effort where complex community issues are addressed holistically, ensuring that resources are provided effectively, efficiently, and consistently, with the community knowing what resources are available, how to access them, and what services they can expect to be provided. So this graphic demonstrates the 4 levels of intervention to community issues. Incident response is expensive, and that is where resources, including police, fire, ambulance, social services, hospitals, and emergency rooms, etc., are required to deal with people in potential crisis situations. This plan focuses primarily on the other 3 levels in order to reduce the calls for service and reduce the risk to our communities. The more initiatives we can implement that are focused on social development, prevention, and risk intervention, the greater impact we can have on our communities. Some examples of programs that have had a very positive impact include the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team model. We're taking the services to the street and to the people who need them, but struggle to access them, are served better, and as a result, result in less in the way of expensive incident response. And I'll turn it over to Kim to discuss how we created the roadmap.
Thank you and good afternoon. The stakeholders listed above provided DPRA with their advice, guidance, and local experience in developing the research and survey tools to ensure the right organizations and individuals were contracted to contribute to this plan. The advisory committee meetings provided the opportunity for leadership positions who have the ability to make decisions and are authorized to allocate resources, including funding from existing budgets, to come together for a common purpose. It is this structure at the senior leadership level that will model the participation of the action groups to inform the executive leadership team. The plan is guided by the following set of principles: respect, equity, collaboration, inclusion, commitment, and compassion. As you can appreciate, there's a lot of existing information that needed to be reviewed to ensure that the goals and objectives of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan aligned with the existing strategic plans of our municipalities and supported the goals that we want to achieve as councils. All of the information obtained from the research and consultations were built into this plan. Stakeholder engagement is the key to this plan being successfully accepted by our communities to address the diverse needs of each of our municipalities. The next few slides provide an overview of the efforts that were used to reach out to the community and provide them an opportunity to participate so they could have their input into our priorities, objectives, and goals of this plan. A comprehensive online survey was conducted with significant efforts being made to get the public to complete the surveys. In the end, an impressive 1,078 surveys were completed, with the proportion by municipality outlined here. In addition to the surveys, a number of facilitated discussions and one-on-one interviews were held. A total of 91 people participated in these sessions. The last component of the stakeholder engagement session focused on those with lived experiences. I think we all recognize that until we've walked a mile in another person's shoes, we really don't know what challenges they have faced along the way. Those with lived experiences have unique perspective, one that the consultants went to great lengths to ensure was included in the engagement process. Because if we don't know our consumer, then the delivery of the service won't meet their needs, whether that is the delivery of the programs for seniors, for youth, or supports for those suffering from mental health and addiction issues. These engagement sessions did not take place as originally planned, as the work plan for this project predated the pandemic. Workarounds were then implemented. Regardless, because of consistent messaging we heard throughout the engagement process, we are confident that the priorities identified will have the most positive impact in our communities. And now Chief Skinner will share with you the consultation findings.
So what did we hear from those consultations? We heard that for all residents to feel safe and physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, their basic needs must be met. We heard that safety and well-being means residents feel they belong, they are welcome, they are respected, and they are connected to others in the community. We heard there are vulnerable individuals and families in our communities who need additional help to enhance the quality of their lives. We heard there are many excellent social, health, and recreational and leisure programs and services available to residents in and across the 6 partner municipalities. And we heard that not all residents are able to access the services and supports they need, when they need them, where they need them. The survey responses for all the communities indicated that access to healthcare services was the #1 priority to support community safety and well-being. Stratford and St. Mary's both had adequate and affordable housing as their #2 priority, while Northwest and South Perth respondents identified other community securities and safety as their #2 priority. This catch-all includes police visibility and enforcement strategies as a deterrent to criminal behavior or criminal activity and traffic-related issues. Perth East respondents identified recreational activity opportunities as their #2 priority. This plan takes into account the similarities and differences in these identified priorities, enabling each municipality to put programs and services in place to meet their specific community's needs. The facilitated focus groups and one-on-one discussions identified similar priorities in more detail, as you'll see in the slide here on the screen. As we said earlier in the presentation, the intent of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is to leverage the great work already being done and support the implementation of programs on a go forward that address any gaps in service delivery. We identified some of the ongoing committees and initiatives that are in place supporting some of the priorities identified, which this plan will rely on to inform our future coordinated efforts. I'll now turn it over to Inspector Cinco, who will review the 4 priority areas.
All of the research, consultations with stakeholders, and engagement with the public culminated into the identification of 4 priority areas that will focus the work and contributions to community safety and well-being. Priority area #1, we've titled Systems Planning and Integration, with the first goal being to improve knowledge of and access to programs, services, supports, and resources. What became apparent during the engagement sessions was that people either didn't know what programs were available in their community or how to access the programs that did exist. More creative and persistent communication initiatives will better position people to access and utilize the supports already in place and better identify any gaps. Goal #2 under this priority is focused on police visibility and more subject matter experts on patrol or readily accessible to police as a deterrent to negative behavior in our communities. And of course, major event planning and preparedness was identified in response to the efforts being put in place to keep our communities safe and healthy during this global pandemic. Priority area number 2 is adequate, affordable, and attainable housing. The goal of this area is to increase the availability and accessibility of affordable, safe, and suitable housing by supporting the strategic objectives of our area's updated housing and homelessness plan. Priority area number 3, affordable and accessible health, social, and recreation services. Goals include improving the availability and accessibility to healthcare services by supporting healthcare partners in their work and improving knowledge of and awareness of crisis response triage options. And a third goal under this priority area is to increase the availability of affordable transportation options and support the efforts that are currently underway. Priority area number 4, social inclusion. Goals include increasing the application of equity, diversity, and inclusion practices across all partner agencies and promote understanding of the diverse groups and populations that live in our communities. And the final goal under this area is to enhance our residents' sense of community belonging by creating and maintaining safe and welcoming public spaces and increasing access to community events and activities for everyone. And at this time, I'll pass it back to Kim to share what happens next.
Thank you. After Council's adoption of this plan as the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, the next step will be the implementation. One of the things we have constantly heard when dealing with members of the public is that we may not be aware of the issues plaguing our communities, but no one is doing anything about it. And some with lived experience feel that nobody cares about them. Nothing could be further from the reality, but it speaks to the need for more communication. A big part of the initial phase of the implementation will be a comprehensive communication strategy to inform rollout of the plan to the public, provide ongoing updates to the enhancements being made to our collective service delivery efforts to demonstrate to the public that this plan is not sitting on a shelf. The public has high expectations of its politicians and municipal employees. In order to maintain trust and support from our constituents, we need to do a better job of letting the public know what we are doing, what we hope to achieve, and how they can be part of the solution. Slide 28 speaks to the strategic engagement approach to our community safety and wellbeing plan. It recognizes the strengths that already exist within and across municipalities and organizations. It enhances the effectiveness by creating more strategically aligned and formalized alliances. It helps to improve integration, enhance capacity, reduce duplication, and promote coordination and collaboration. The community safety and well-being plans are meant to bring those with individual mandates together as partners to find creative ways to deal with local issues and explore options. The concept of team facilitates the potential for the whole to be greater than the sum of its parts. Coordination of resources, sharing of information, integrated approach to problem solving, less duplications, and greater efficiencies are all benefits of collaboration, and the community as a whole benefits when organizational leaders can model the way by thinking beyond their own mandates and how decisions are made may affect the environments of others. The governance structure to provide guidance, direction, and oversight of the plan has been the subject of significant discussion. For the implementation of the plan, the decision has been made to delineate the executive leadership as those who are legislatively bound to have the plan in place and have participated as funding partners to create the plan, thus having broad responsibilities for their individual community safety and well-being. So each of the partner municipalities will have a seat at the executive leadership team with the police and social services participating as co-chairs and resources to the executive leadership team. The voting rights are reserved for the representatives of the municipalities. The key stakeholder committees consist of the leaderships of those existing agencies and organizations whose mandates are aligned with the goals and objectives of this plan. The action group is where the heavy liftings will take place, and there is flexibility to align the action groups based on geography, priority, or those already existing in the committees. The plan will leverage existing committees, and the first implementation step for the plan will be to conduct an inventory of all the existing committees in Perth County, review their mandates and the programs they currently have in place. We will then begin the process of bringing the leadership from like-minded action groups together for greater clarity on what exists currently and how those committees are currently interacting. The responsibility of the Partnership Council will be to implement the plan, identify linkages between the programs and services, and enhance coordination among and between municipalities and service providers. It will be the responsibility of the Partnership Council to determine how frequently to report back to the individual municipal councils, determine the annual budget allocations that will go before each council, and to provide operational support to the plan. The Partnership Council will have the final decision-making over the structure of the plan. We anticipate that there will be a report back expectation for the Ministry of Solicitor General, although this has not been clarified yet, and the Partnership Council will have that responsibility as well. The action groups will be the conduit to this plan for the community. These groups will be the backbone of the plan and will provide the means to where the creativity, innovation, and problem-solving acumen will have the most impact on our communities. Communication, cooperation, collaboration, and commitment will be key components to the success of this plan. Chief Skinner will now conclude this presentation.
Once all of the partner councils have reviewed, approved, and adopted the plan through resolution, then the implementation team plan can be put into action. The last of the presentations to individual councils happens today, May 25th, with St. Mary's tonight. And assuming all adopt the plan, then the next steps will be to 1, convene the Partnership Council and formalize the implementation plan and terms of reference. 2, identify action groups and inventory their individual mandates, composition, priorities, goals, objectives, and accomplishments to date. 3, develop performance measurement and evaluation tools for the purposes of focus and report back. And 4, and most importantly, establish a communication strategy to publicly introduce the plan. Just a couple of final thoughts before opening it up for questions. I first of all want to commend Tracy and her team from DPRA for being able to complete this plan during a pandemic. I don't know if any of us truly appreciate the challenges that her team faced in engaging the public and key stakeholders during a period of community lockdowns, video conferencing, and competing priorities for municipal and corporate leaders. Thank you, Tracy, to you and your team. Also, I want to congratulate your municipality on the commitment of your staff throughout this process. We recognize that each municipality has its individual needs, and in no way, shape, or form is this plan an attempt to impose its priorities on your community. This is not a zero-sum game. This is about bringing people and committees together and to understand the diverse issues, broaden the impact of successes already achieved, and leverage the knowledge and commitment of existing committees, and in so doing, provide you as elected representatives with the information you need to satisfy yourselves and your constituents that progress is being made to make your community safer and enhance your community members' quality of life. And with that, I would certainly open it up to questions for our team and we would happily take them.
All right, well, first of all, on behalf of council, thank you to your team, a very well done presentation, and to Tracy and her staff. Any questions currently for Chief Skinner or any member of the panel? Councilor Burback.
Thank you. Thanks very much for this presentation. I think that report looks excellent, and it provides a great plan for moving forward, which is really important. I did have a question about the Partnership Council. how do you envision that, or who would sit on such a council?
Kim, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, through your worship. Within the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan, with the implementation, there is a governance structure that outlines the Partnership Council. So on the left, there's a diagram of the executive leadership team where it says it's appointed staff members by the CAOs of the municipalities are appointed, as well as the two police services and the City of Stratford Social Services. To the right, we have the key stakeholder committees that are included with that. So that will make up the partnership councils, with the voting members being the executive leadership team, which is representatives from the CAO staff of municipalities.
Okay, thank you. So under the various municipalities, then would there be elected officials from each of those bodies represented?
Through you, the worship, the terms of reference is actually CAO, staff appointed CAOs.
Okay, I'm just curious about that. Yeah, I just had a couple of other comments. I know that Stratford is slightly different than our surrounding municipalities because we're more of a city. We're a little bit more urban. Some of our needs are a little different. I noticed that one of our key priorities on page 15 is protection from discrimination, which didn't appear on anyone else's list. We have taken steps to address that. Some of them you'll see under goal 4 or 4.1, 4.2. We've got the seat committee, which is moving forward. I do think that under objective 4.2.2, the seat committee, it's an excellent resource. It'll be great for addressing systemic racism within the police force. I'm not sure about how it's going to address racism within the broader community. So I just wanted to point that out, that might be something that we need to consider as a possible separate objective to look at the broader community and how racism affects people here. And I'd also like to suggest that maybe our partner municipalities could also look at joining the Canadian Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. We are a member of that. We joined last year, and they have a great plan through that organization to tackle some of these issues. So I think it'd be really great if our partner municipalities could also look at joining that coalition, and then maybe we can work through some of that process together. I do know that some of our partner municipalities have been talking about systemic racism and attempting to get more information from the community. So I would encourage them to work together with Stratford and to put forward something that will address systemic racism in our communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone further? Yeah, Councillor Vasilakos.
I had a question around, so this is, if we refer this to the budget process, would implementation of this plan fall under the Municipal Shared Services Committee in terms of funding it? My concern is it going to be sort of annual funding, or can we get a commitment from all of the participating municipalities to fund this out for a number of years? And I'm wondering how the budgeting process then would work for that, because if we want a plan that doesn't sit on a shelf, then it can't be sort of subject to annual budget constraints that may come along. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the budgeting around the plan.
Yeah, I'll turn that over to Kim again, Your Worship, through you, and the discussions that have been happening with the CAOs of all of the partner municipalities.
Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, the discussions have started taking place for the 2022 budget as to the cost sharing of the plan, of the operations of the plan. And it will be between the 5 lower tier municipalities with Stratford. And that's what we're looking at with the budget coming forward from the Partnership Council to be presented to councils.
Thank you. And I was just going to follow up. I really like that I saw within the report that it's taking a collective impact approach to the problem. I think that's a really great way to address complex problems, and it allows you to move forward even if something isn't exactly perfect. And I know that when you have a really complex, imperfect situation, sometimes waiting for perfect isn't good enough. And so that's where I think the collective impact approach is going to be really useful. So thank you.
Councillor Clifford.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask, it's the province that's asking us for this. Is the province helping, especially when you talk about affordable housing and other things? Is there aspect from the province and or Ottawa that's going to help all us? It'll be all the municipalities in Ontario. So is there anything on that from the province?
Through you, Your Worship, at this point, there is no dedicated funding from the province or the federal government with respect to the community safety and well-being plans at the municipal level. I do anticipate that there will be funding opportunities through grants upcoming that will support the collective coordinated programs that our municipalities want to put in place that are specifically focused on the priorities of the community safety and well-being plan. So while there's nothing in place yet, I do anticipate that there will be some funding available, and it will be up to us collectively as a group to put forward those grant proposals for funding to support the priorities that we've laid out in the plan.
Thank you. Anything further? I believe we need a mover and a seconder for the adoption of this report as presented. Councillor Burbach, Councillor Henderson. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you.
Through your worship, item 7.4 is a proclamation from City, and there is a motion that City Council hereby proclaims June 2021 as Deaf Blind Awareness Month in the City of Stratford to promote public awareness of deaf-blind issues and to recognize the contribution of Canadians who are deaf-blind.
Moved by Councillor Sebin and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 7.5 is correspondence, and as noted on the agenda, the appeal of bylaw 116-2020 to amend the zoning bylaw with respect to 173 Huron Street has been withdrawn. There are no other outstanding appeals in the matter, and the decision of council is final and binding. And this is provided for the information of council.
Thank you.
Item 7.6 is a resolution regarding the 2021 electric ice resurfacer tender. And there is a staff recommendation that the report titled 2021 Electric Ice Resurfacer T 2021-16 Award be received by council. And that council award the 2021 Electric Ice Resurfacer tender to Zamboni Company Limited in the amount of $185,596.85, including HST.
Thank you. Mover, Councillor Beattie, Councillor Gaffney, seconding. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 7.7 is a proclamation from the Canadian Trigeminal Neuralgia Association, and there is a motion that City Council hereby proclaims October 7th, 2021 as International Trigeminal Neuralgia Day in the City of Stratford to bring awareness to those who suffer from trigeminal neuralgia.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Burbach, moving and seconding. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 7.8 is a resolution regarding electric vehicle charging station review and expansion, and there is a staff recommendation that direction be given to submit an application for funding to install 11 dual output level 2 EV charging stations to Arcan's RFP under the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program and report back to council with total project costs if the city's application is approved, and that a one-time transfer from the Parking Reserve Fund in the amount of $7,449.85 be approved for replacement of the EV charging station at Upper Queens Park.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Burbach. Moving and seconding. Questions. Councillor Ingram, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you. I just wondered if the project is specific to level 2 EV charging stations. There are no level 3 charging stations within Stratford boundaries at all, or within the vicinity of the area. And I was wondering why we could not include a mix of the different levels of charging stations within this application.
Mr. Bantock?
Through your worship. So my understanding of the RFP is it's not restricted to level 2 charging stations, and it is applicable to fast charging stations, which I believe would be the next level up. It's not something that we've explored with the vendor that offers our stations that we've been exploring the project opportunity with. But at the direction of council, we could certainly include that exploration, but it would carry a higher cost to implement those stations.
Well, if I may, I'd like to include that as a friendly amendment if the mover and seconder would do so, specifically just to report back on the costs if we are successful, because as I say, we have no level 3 charging stations within this vicinity. I think Woodstock is the closest level 3 charging stations just off the 401. So I think it would be beneficial because it does take about 20 to 25 minutes to charge a full battery with the level 3 charging stations, whereas the level 2 takes quite a few hours.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson?
Warranties on these, it's like it only seems that was, maybe it's longer, it feels like it's only 5 or 6 years since we got the charging station in Upper Queens Park, and I was surprised to hear that it's in such bad shape it needs to be replaced.
Mr. Bantock?
Through your worship. So the station at Upper Queens, if I recall correctly, is about 6 years old. The reason that it needs replacement is because they've since introduced a new model and no longer service the older model. So there aren't any options available to us to fix that current model. The replacement, as was noted in the report, unfortunately isn't covered by the project RFP, so we'd be seeking that separately.
What is the warranty period on them when you're getting them?
So through your worship, the new purchases come with 1 year warranty. There is additional warranty options available, but that again comes at a higher cost. I believe we were quoted around 3,000 for 5 years per station.
And I would like to follow up a bit more on what Councillor Ingram was bringing up about the level 3. I didn't realize level 1 and level 2 took a long time to charge. What would be the purpose of having that type? Like our parking downtown is 4 hours. At Upper Queens Park, of course, you can park as long as you want. I'm just curious, what's the purpose? Do you get a bit of a charge if you're just on it for, say, the 4 hours? If it's a long charging time?
Through your worship, I'm not as familiar with the exact timing and charging capabilities between the units, but I do know that that's accurate, that the level 3 charger, or as other referred to as a fast charger, does charge your vehicle a bit quicker than the others.
So I guess my question is, why are we even looking at 1 and 2 then? Like, what's the purpose of getting one that's a slow charger? When people are at home, I would assume you have a long charger one, but if you're out in the community, wouldn't you need a quicker charge one?
So through your worship, the level 2 chargers we've explored because we have those available right now. We've received positive feedback in their use, and just kind of general feedback that additional stations would be beneficial. But as mentioned already, we'll certainly be looking at adding the level 3 chargers as well.
Thank you. City Clerk, I see your hand, Ms. Defoe.
So through the chair, just in addition to the deputy clerk's comments, with respect to level 3 chargers, it's my understanding they can charge vehicles. It takes approximately about 20 minutes, I believe. However, with that model, amongst other municipalities and organizations, they typically charge $20, I believe, for use of that charging station. Whereas with level 2, we presently don't charge for the use of electricity because the parking rate basically recoups that. So that would just be another thing we would have to look at, is the fee structure for a level 2 charger versus like a level 3 charger. So just some additional information from what we've seen of other EV charging stations installed throughout the province.
Thank you. I have Councillor Gaffney, Councillor Seven, Councillor Ingram, Councillor Burback.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, my question goes to recouping the cost. And I think that we should be charging, just like Petro-Canada charges on the 401, the cost of electricity. Nobody from the city of Stratford pays for my gas to go on my vehicle. So, and this is no different. It's the means of propulsion for this thing, and we should be charging accordingly for the hydro. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I just wanted to some clarification around the amendment. Sorry. Sorry, just a little noisy here. Just clarification about, so will that come back as part of the report, is how I understood that, and then when that comes back, we can decide on which to proceed with. Is that correct?
I'll let Mr. Bantock clarify, but that's as I understand it as chair.
Through Your Worship, that's correct. That's what we would plan to do. I just to note as well, and we can report back on this as well. I'm still waiting for confirmation from NRCan. When I was looking through their applicants' guidelines, there was mention that if charges are included for the recouping of electricity, that there is potential for some of the funding to be paid back at a ratio that's calculated based on what was charged. So I'm still waiting for confirmation to see if that applies to municipalities, because the general understanding is that municipalities wouldn't fall under that, but I'm still waiting for confirmation, and we would look to include that in the report back as well.
Okay, thank you. And then as a follow-up, are we able to apply for funding for both of them sort of in parallel and then choose at the time if we're approved for both?
Through Your Worship, we would apply for both through the same and note where we would like to include installations for each at different sites, depending on approval and what the costing looks like. We would have to determine if we were able, how much we were able to change the project once we reach a certain point.
Okay, so then, thank you. So then applying for 3 and 2 wouldn't hurt our chances of the approval for the funding of all level 2?
Through Your Worship, not necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Ingram, Burback, and Henderson.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add to the discussion that in addition to the difference in the fee structure, our city clerk is correct. They do charge about $20 to use the level 3 charging stations. It is quite expensive versus the level 2 stations that are not generally, you don't have to pay a fee for in most municipalities. The benefit to having a mix of level 2 and level 3 is that we do want our visitors to be able to wander around our downtown and be able to spend some time, and if they need that charge, then if we have some level 2 charging stations that they do have to use 4 hours to be able to charge their vehicle to be able to get to their next spot, then it does mean that they're going to spend 4 hours in our community, which I think is a good thing. So having the mix of both levels of charging stations is appropriate.
Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Actually, I was going to ask a similar question to Councillor Gaffney. And also to answer Councillor Henderson's question, you can do a partial charge. So if you were charging for an hour, it would still be useful. You don't need to stay for a full charge.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Henderson, do you have anything else?
I just, I guess I was thinking about if we just say got one of the level 3, how would we decide where to put that? Or would we be looking at, say, 2 of them? You said Woodstock was the closest, I think, Councillor Ingram, and I'm wondering if they just have one. I understand all these charging systems go on like an app, so you can find out where they all are, right? And I'm assuming that it also says whether it's a level 2 or a level 3. And my other part of my comment was, I thought when we got, I think it's a level 2 up at Upper Queens Park, that the reason we didn't charge for the hydro was it was not very much hydro, and it was probably more expensive to put something in to have somebody pay than it was just to have it in there.
Mr. Bantock.
So through your worship, the ChargePoint does offer a dashboard that customers can use to find stations, and it would identify the different stations. The location or the sites that have been identified, as noted in the report, were done so partly through parking lots that have upcoming work, or other lots that would be deemed beneficial to have charging stations. So what we're doing right now with a contractor in Festival Hydro is looking at the appropriate infrastructure nearby to determine the maximum loads that can be offered at each of the locations, depending on how many chargers and what types of chargers you want to have there. So we can revisit that, looking at where the level 3s might work best in terms of the available infrastructure.
Thank you. All right, is there anything further? Councillor Clifford.
I was just going to ask, when it was brought up the last time, I did ask what Councillor Gaffney asked about charging, but I can understand that, you know, if they shop in Stratford. But my question is, how do we control that it isn't people in town that are using the charging station? Is it okay for everyone to use it, or is it for travelers? And how do we control, if we do want travelers to come in and to shop downtown when they're charging? So my question is, how do we control who is using the charging stations?
Well, to be quite candid, we don't, and I'm not sure how you can. So I guess you have to outweigh the value of the program overall versus those that might take advantage of the program. All right, we have a motion on the floor, and it had a friendly amendment that the mover and seconder agreed to include evaluation of level 3 charging. If there's any other discussion, if not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Councillor Ritzma. I have a personal item to attend to. Councillor Ritzma. And I'll leave it to the clerk. Next item.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ritzma. Item 7.9 is correspondence regarding a resignation from the Communities in Bloom Advisory Committee. And there is a motion that the resignation of Paul Smith from the Communities in Bloom Advisory Committee effective June 1st, 2021 be accepted.
And that's moved by Councillor Beattie and second by Councillor Burbach. Any discussion? Councillor Henderson.
I just wanted to thank Paul for all his work on behalf of the committee. He's done an excellent job. We will miss him.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Item 7.10 is a resolution regarding the 2021 asphalt resurfacing project update, and there is a staff recommendation that the report on the 2021 asphalt resurfacing project update be received for information, and that staff report back to council for tender award.
Thank you. Mover for that item, Councillor Vasilakos, second by Councillor Ingram. Discussion? Councillor Vasilakos.
I just wanted a clarification for council and for staff that with the tender would be the option for, would be some pricing option to continue the bike lanes from McCarthy up to Vivian Line, so that we could consider that when the tender was to come back. I only say that because this may be one of our few opportunities to get that piece connected, and it would make a really nice connection with existing cycling infrastructure in that part of the city.
Director Krinkla?
Yeah, through Deputy Mayor. Based on the comments that we did receive from the public engagement that we did have, that was one of the concerns raised, was maintaining the traffic master or the active transportation master plan of having the connecting link from Delamere to Vivian Line. Since the tender has all the quantity items needed to do that work, it's just a matter of adding additional quantities to that. So when the tender closes, we can calculate how much that additional cost will be and present that at the time we request from council to award the tender.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Burbach?
Just a further comment to that. I would really support having that separated bike lanes there. It is a truck route. So it's really important to make sure that cyclists are safe. The other thing is that I attended a webinar hosted by Cycle Ontario. Destination Stratford and the Perth County Tourism were also co-hosts of that webinar. And they were talking about cycle tourism and how it's a really up and coming form of tourism and how it's really important. One of the most important pieces of cycling tourism is to make sure we have some infrastructure so that people will want to come here as tourists to do some cycling. And a lot of cycling tourists do take longer rides. So a connection like this one is actually providing a connection to those out of town routes. So I do think it's first and foremost important for people who live there, who can connect, or our own residents, but it is also an investment in tourism as well.
Thank you, Councillor Burbach. Councillor Gaffney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just a clarification. Romeo Street is not a truck route. It may be where a lot of trucks drive, but the truck route is actually the Home Hardware side road to Vivian Street to Mornington Street. Just so people out there understand that, no, Romeo is not a truck route. Lots of trucks use it. I agree with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. Councillor Henderson?
When did it get changed that it's no longer a truck route? It's listed as a truck route, so I'm so shocked to hear that, Councillor Gaffney.
I'll turn it over to the director.
Yeah, through Deputy Mayor. We have definitely been treating it as a truck route, and it's my understanding that it is designated as such. But I can confirm that at a later date if need be.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed of any, and that's unanimous.
Moving on to item 8, business for which previous notice has been given, and item 8.1 is the reconsideration of patio fees. And as noted on the agenda, at the May 10th, 2001 regular council meeting, a request was made to list the following motion for consideration on today's agenda. And that motion is that the March 22nd, 2021 council resolution regarding patio pricing be reconsidered.
Thank you. Councillor Vasilakos?
I'm just moving that so that
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Seven, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Burbach?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be supporting this motion. I do think that our restaurants and our small businesses downtown have had already enough struggles. I think if we can help them out with these patio fees, that will make a difference. We did get a report back that there are a few businesses that did not reconsider joining the patio program because of the cost. And so this might give them an opportunity to also be able to participate. So I will be supporting this motion.
Any other comments? Councillor Seven?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with Councillor Burbach's points there, and I'll also be supporting. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Ingram?
Thank you. So I will also be supporting this motion. I think I want to go back to some of the comments that I made when we first started talking about the tiered patio fees and the fees for the installation. In that, I think we need to remember that we're talking about, between $5,000 and $10,000 per business. And for some of our downtown restaurants whose average ticket price is between $10 and $15, that's a really substantial fee for them to be paying, and their ticket price is not their profit. That is just what people are paying to go into their business. The profit that they're making is more in the range of $2. So to make up $5,000 to $10,000 when your profit margin is $2 is a really difficult thing to do. And I just think this is an easy thing for us to consider to be able to help those businesses and provide them with that benefit.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Councillor Vasilakos.
Thank you. And I want to also talk about sort of the change in circumstance from when we first considered this, because now that we understand what the reopening looks like with the province, it will be well into July before there's any use of inside space for a lot of these restaurants. And so what we have superimposed upon, we will have an increase in outside activities that will be allowed, outside events that will be allowed, visitors coming for things that will be done outside, but we won't have the capacity to provide patio. Like we have businesses downtown that will not be able to use their inside space at all. The retail space will be, and it will be opened up for them, and they'll be able to manage that inside with merchandise and things like that, but our restaurants will not. It will be probably well into July before that part is open. So I think given the change in circumstance and the different looking off ramp from this latest lockdown, I think it's appropriate to think of ways that we can open up that space for our businesses, but also for visitors and for locals as well.
Councillor Clifford and Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I was going to ask a couple questions. Has anyone already paid for the service? And if we do decide to have it free, how much is the cost and how do we pay for it? Like, do we have a budget? Like in our budget, do we have something to help pay for it?
I'll turn it over to the clerk.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Ritzma, if I could just interject, if we could call the motion currently on the agenda, this is just to reconsider the item. Following that being carried or defeated, well, if it's carried, we would then be looking for a motion to potentially rescind the patio pricing resolution that was previously adopted. Should that be carried, we would then be looking for additional direction on whether the fees are to be waived. If we can do the motion to consider and then potentially rescind the patio fees, then I would turn it over to the deputy clerk to answer the questions from Councillor Clifford that he just asked.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor. Thank you very much, Ms. Defoe. I'll call the question on the motion that's on the floor. All in favor? Opposed, if any? 2 opposed, so that's carried. I see you're doing some counting. Yes.
So through you, Deputy Mayor, my apologies. It does require 2/3 of council present. 2/3 of 10 members is 7, and I apologize. I might have missed a hand or not.
Let's have that vote again then. Thank you. And just keep them up so we can get a count. All in favor? And opposed? 2 opposed.
So through Deputy Mayor, that carries. There were 7 members.
Yes.
My apologies.
That's fine. I'm glad you checked. That's better than trying to undo something we've done wrong. So thank you. So that motion has been passed. So I'm going to turn it over to the deputy clerk to answer Councillor Clifford's question. Mr. Bantock.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. My understanding, I believe the city clerk referenced there was to be a motion to rescind the fees.
No. I'll turn it back to the clerk.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Ritzma, if the intent is to rescind the resolution, then we would ask for that at this time.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk, and thank you, Clerk. So a motion to rescind the fees Moved by Councillor Burbach, seconded by Councillor Ingram. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Clifford, did you want to ask your question first, and then I'll go to Councillor Henderson?
Well, that's fine. I've asked the question, so I don't have to ask it again, like the cost and how we pay for it.
So then I'll turn it back to the Deputy Clerk.
For you, Deputy Mayor. So no fees have been collected at this time. Staff have withheld collecting fees, understanding that patios have not been able to operate at this time. It's also my understanding that the council did approve in the budget $50,000 for the patio extension program, and that there should be enough funds available to cover not having the collection of these fees.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I didn't see that there was a report attached to our council meeting, so I kind of want to, Councillor Clifford asked, but do we actually have a total how much we would be missing out on? And the second part of my question is, we constantly seem to be talking about restaurants. What about other businesses in the downtown that sell clothes or furniture, paints, or I know the pharmacies are open, but I mean, like, we have a lot of stores downtown that aren't open right now. Or are they just eligible under federal grants?
Maybe I'll turn it over to Mr. Bantock for the first part of that question.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So I can certainly answer the first part of that question. So in terms of the fees for occupying parking spaces for participants in the program last year, based on applications at this time, if we were to charge between from the months of June to October for this year's season, it would be approximately $15,000. For the boardwalk installation and removal, we just received the invoice for the first round of installations. There is a slight increase in the per unit installation, which is only about $20 per unit, but for removal and install, it's about $800 across all of them. So in total, that before tax, that comes to about $18,500. So if you combine those, you'd be looking at approximately $33,500.
So I have Councillor Bunting and then Gaffney and Vasilakos. Oh, Councillor Henderson, did you have a
What about
follow-up?
the second part? We deal with restaurants. What about all the rest of the businesses downtown?
Madam Clerk, I'll turn that over to you.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Ritzman, unfortunately, I cannot comment on any small grants that they could apply for, but I can advise that when the city is in a lockdown period, we do offer retailers free meterhood rentals. That does change depending on the framework that we're in. Because the province has just recently announced a new framework, staff will need to revisit that and may need to bring additional information to council on how the meterhood rental would work in the new framework to be imposed.
Okay, I'll move along then to Councillor Bunting, Gaffney, and Vasilakos.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to the deputy clerk, with respect to the bump outs that we have in stock, I think the last time we spoke about this, you had 4 or 5 not being asked for at this particular point in time. How are we going to handle that with respect to requests from some restaurants? In other words, if there's 6 or 7 restaurants put in for it, we've only got 4 or 5. It'll be a first come, first serve, or will we be expected to make additional bump outs and costs involved with that?
Deputy Clerk.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So at this time, because we have received additional applications since the latest update was provided, We're looking at approximately 2 boardwalks remaining. The boardwalks are first come, first serve, and eligible restaurants do also have the pop-up patio opportunity should they be interested and not there not be boardwalks remaining.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Bunting. Councillor Gaffney.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't think I had a question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vasilakos.
I just wanted to reiterate my point with a lot of the retailers will have the opportunity to use very probably in not too long in that first phase of the reopening, the ability to use the space inside, and they will have the ability to open their doors and allow people through. It will be physically distanced, it'll be limited capacity, but I think they have that opportunity. I think the reason why I'm looking at sort of restaurants is because their ability to have people inside and sitting down, and where they make a lot of their profit for the season, is going to be delayed. Inside dining will be delayed for some time, and that's why if there were something that to come along in terms of parking rates or hoods or something like that for those businesses, we could revisit that at that time. But I think right now I'm looking to see if we can relieve current fee structure that we're putting on restaurants that don't have the option of using their inside space.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. Councillor Henderson.
I just want clarification. So before when we were talking about this, it was the restaurants that were involved last year. And so this year it was going to be the same ones that would be reconsidered. If somebody comes along now that's maybe they're a new restaurant and they decide they want to be part of it, are they to be included?
Deputy Clerk.
Through your worship. So when council approved the last motion to implement fees, new businesses to the program were not included. So it's currently only participants from last year's program that would pay fees.
So if we have some that come along and maybe they want to have a patio only and they have the space and they don't need a boardwalk, will they pay a fee?
Deputy.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, if they are new, then no, they will not pay a fee.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Any other questions or comments? Through the clerk, I believe we have a motion that's on the floor.
So for you, Deputy Mayor Ritzma, yes, it is my understanding that a motion was moved by Councillor Burback and Councillor Ingram. That motion would be that the March 22nd, 2021 council resolution regarding patio pricing be rescinded. That would rescind the entire motion. So then we would be looking for additional direction on whether all patio fees are to be waived for all participating businesses.
So I will call the question that's on the floor, and then we'll look for further direction from council. So all in favor of the motion on the floor? Just please keep your hand there for a moment. And opposed, if any? And that motion is carried. Thank you. So we'll move forward then. As mentioned by the clerk, we're certainly looking for direction. Staff is looking for direction to move forward with regards to this item. Councillor Henderson.
I make a motion for the year 2021 that the patio license fees and the boardwalk installation and removal is at no cost to the merchants.
Seconder for that motion. Seconder is Councillor Burback. Discussion. And through the clerk, does that give you that motion? Does that give you enough direction?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ritzma, yes, it's my understanding the intent is to waive the patio license and boardwalk fees for 2021.
Okay. Any further, Councillor Vasilakos?
For clarity, and that includes pop-up patio fees as well?
So through you, Deputy Mayor Ritzma, yes, we would include it for all patio types. So all the fees for the patio program would be waived for 2021.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Vasilakos. Any further comments, questions before I call the question? Seeing none, I'll ask to keep your hands up just so we can get a good count. All in favor of the motion? And opposed of any? And that's 2 opposed, and that motion's carried.
To you, Deputy Mayor, moving on to item 9, reports of the standing committees. Item 9.1 is the report of the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee. And there are 4 items listed for consideration as follows. Item 9.1.1 is passive house standards in net zero ready homes. Item 9.1.2 is update of sewer policy S18 and sewer policy S110. Item 9.1.3 is a resolution for the 2020 Stratford Water Pollution Control Plant Annual Report. And item 9.1.4 is a request for exemption from the noise control bylaw for the Hub Stratford's 5-year anniversary.
Thank you. As chair, Councillor Vasilakos, you will move, and Councillor Burbach as co-chair or assistant chair. Can't think of the name right now. I apologize. We'll second that. All in favor? Opposed of any? And that's carried.
Item 10 is notice of intent, and there is none scheduled. So moving on to item 11, reading of the bylaws. There are 6 bylaws listed for consideration as follows. Item 11.1 is to appoint park patrollers for 2021. Item 11.2 is an acceptance of tender for the supply and installation of accessible bus shelters. Item 11.3 is the acceptance of tender for the supply and delivery of 1 electric ice resurfacer. Item 11.4 is to amend bylaw 60-2021, a bylaw to set tax ratios, rates, and reductions. Item 11.5 is an appointment to the Shared Services Committee. And item 11.6 is the transfer to Southwest Build Co. Limited of Part 1 and 3 on Plan 44R-5305. And these bylaws can be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council present.
So a mover for taking them collectively, moved by Councillor Beattie, second by Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. So moving on to the first and second reading. Moved by Councillor Vasilakos, second by Councillor Bunting. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And third and final, Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Burbach. Thank you. All in favor? And that's unanimous.
Item 12 is the consent agenda. Are there any items listed on the consent agenda to be considered by council?
Councillor Vasilakos, I see your hand.
Sorry, I believe it's item 73. I'd like to support the National Suicide and Crisis 3-digit hotline.
Certainly. And Councillor Henderson will support that or second that. Thank you. Discussion on that item? Seeing none, all in favor of support of that item? And that's unanimous. Any other items for consideration? Councillor Burbach.
Thank you. I'd like us to endorse the Town of Perth's request for provincial funding for hospital major capital equipment. That's CA 2021-69.
Thank you. A seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion? Councillor Henderson.
This would be a new initiative that they're looking to start, eh? Because my understanding is the provincial government only covers operating costs, and that all hospitals in Ontario, anything for capital, they have to fundraise and raise the money themselves. I just want to clarify that's the direction they're heading. Okay.
That would be my understanding. Certainly that's the case here in the city of Stratford for sure. And Councillor Vasilakos, I'm sure you can speak to that as well.
Well, I was just going to say that results in a universal healthcare system that isn't universal. That if you have a community that is able to fundraise or has, is able to get equipment that other communities that maybe are having difficult financial times or are going through any kind of financial depression won't have that opportunity. So I think it's a really, it's high time the province took over capital funding of hospital equipment as well.
Mhm. So we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded to support the letter from Perth, Ontario. Any other discussion or comments? Seeing none, Councillor Henderson.
I can't remember what the whole, I'm trying to find the resolution to see what the whole thing
Take
is.
your
but
time.
I have concerns about the fact that, you know, as Councillor Bacalaus just brought up, small municipalities would have a hard time. Like I know a lot of the hospitals now are doing these 50-50 draws, and City of Timmins is raising over almost 300,000 every month doing it. Stratford's a little bit slower. They just got started. They're raising almost 10,000. St. Mary's is doing it. Woodstock's doing it. All the different ones are doing it. So I wonder if when the resolution is passed, if there's some consideration for smaller municipalities that would have harder time than say Toronto or London raising the money, because if it gets passed that say the province is going to cover capital costs for all hospitals, I think the smaller ones will still be struggling harder because of the larger ones needing a larger share of the money. You know what I mean? Like I'm just wondering if there's a way to protect that, to help the smaller ones more.
It's a good comment, but I think it's beyond our scope right here. But comment appreciated. Any other discussions, comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. Any other items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
So for you, Deputy Mayor, item 13 is new business. Are there any new business items?
Seeing none.
Item 14 is adjournment to standing committees, and there is a motion that the council meeting adjourn to convene into standing committees as follows. First, in the Planning and Heritage Committee, and second, in the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee, and then to reconvene into council.
And that's moved by Councillor Clifford, seconded by Councillor Ingram. All in favor? And that's unanimous. So I'd like to call to order the Planning and Heritage Committee. Item number 2, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none. Item 3, delegations are unscheduled. Item 4 is the report of the manager of planning. Item 4.1 is planning report zone change application Z03-21 with the address of 14 Milton Street. And I believe Mr. Bannon is on the line. No, I'm sure. Sorry. Yes, he is on the line, but let's go to the first motion, which is a motion to hear the presentation by Patrick McCabe. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Ingram and Councillor Clifford. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And Madam Clerk, is Mr. McCabe available?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I believe Mr. McCabe is on the line. Mr. McCabe, can you hear us?
Yes, there you go. I hear you now.
Thank you. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, it's not really a presentation, Mr. Deputy Mayor. It's more a follow-up to our last meeting, April 19, where we learned that in this residential area that we live here on Milton Street and community, that the only real reason that this is being rezoned from a bed and breakfast with 5 rooms to an inn seems to be that there's no need for an owner-occupied operation here any longer. I learned from the representative managing this rezoning that indeed it will be moved from an owner-operated, whereas an inn doesn't need to be managed. So that further confused me as to whether or not when it was a bed and breakfast, was there an owner on the site? Is the owner from Stratford?
And I can't answer that question. I don't believe we have an answer for that. So, Madam Clerk.
So through you, Deputy Mayor, perhaps we could have all of the questions for Mr. McCabe raised, and then we can turn it over to the planner or potentially the agent for the applicant, who is also available to answer questions.
Oh, I thought that he was here today. That's why I stayed for the full meeting. That's initially my question. If it turns in now to an inn, the ideal situation for this small inn would be to have 5 rooms, potentially 12 people coming to enjoy the full Stratford experience. On the downside of that, if there's going to be no manager available at this small inn in this residential community, who manages any kind of disturbances? If there's no manager, it seems that changing this, rezoning this property is an offload to the residents to end up managing any disturbances. Albeit this is a small consideration now, when things start happening again and we get this pandemic under control, here in this residential community, this is a concern. Inns with no management, leave it up to the residents. And then in the last meeting, April 19th, the manager of this rezoning said, well, just call the police. Now, that's an offload to me, and the police have enough to do without managing inns in our small town here in Stratford. So that's another question. Interested in whether or not the owner is a resident, and whether or not this B&B expansion is going to allow further expansion with the possibility down the road of becoming a bigger operation. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from council for Mr. McCabe before we move to the presentation by staff? Okay, at this time then, I will invite Mr. Bannon to make his presentation. Welcome, Mr. Bannon.
Thank you. The zone change application was submitted by Patterson Planning Consultants to change the zoning at 14 Milton Street from a residential second density R2 bracket 2 zone to a residential third density R3 zone special to allow an inn as an additional permitted use. In addition, the applicant has also requested that the front yard be set back at 6.1 meters. The eastern side yard be set back at 4.2 meters. 0.5 meter setback for a parking area and driveway along the western property line without a planting strip. Two-way traffic with a width of 5 meters for a driveway. And a patio to be located with interior side yard with a setback of 1 meter from the eastern property line. The applicant has submitted a planning justification report and a cultural heritage impact assessment with the application. Subject lands are located on the north side of Milton Street between Downey Street and Niles Street. To the north and south are apartment dwellings. The east is a single detached dwelling and the west is a commercial building. The city's infrastructure has adequate capacity to accommodate an inn on the subject lands, and the proposed inn would contribute to a mix of land uses in the neighborhood and is located on a public transit route. The lands would promote active transportation as they're in close proximity to amenities and servicing in the downtown core and are located less than a block away from the city's public transit terminal. So we feel that the request to add an inn as a permitted use is consistent with the 2020 provincial policy statement. The property is designated as downtown core and a small portion of it is residential area in the official plan and is also within the heritage area. The downtown core identifies priority uses within the designation, which include business and personal services of all types, including hotels, conference facilities, and other similar uses, culture, entertainment, dining, and accommodation. The principles of the official plan encourage encourage the appropriate intensification and infill in the area. The lands are located within the heritage area, and the properties adjacent to the subject lands are designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. Heritage impact assessment was prepared for the proposed development. The report concluded that the heritage qualities of the heritage area or corridor will not be negatively impacted because of the redevelopment. It also stated that the evaluation does not identify any negative impacts on the designated properties at 245 Downey Street or 6 to 8 Shakespeare Street due to the redevelopment. The requested setback reductions recognize the existing building, and the reduced minimum driveway widths and patio setbacks to the patio will allow for reuse of the property in the downtown core. The official plan states that the city will promote the city as a cultural tourism destination and will endeavor to attract new tourism related activities and promote the establishment of new accommodation establishments and facilities to meet the needs of all visitors to the city. This proposed use contributes to the achievement of that policy. Circulation comments. The fire department has noted that a fire inspection report fee will be applied annually to the current rates. Community Services and Upper Thames River Conservation Authority do not have any objections, and the city and railways raised concerns over noise and vibration. Building Services have noted that a letter of use is required to determine if a change of use permit is required to be obtained, and note that 2 building permits still are remaining open on the property. Engineering Services do not have any objection to the application, but they do note that during the site plan process, stormwater management will need to be considered. As we previously heard, one member of the public did speak at the public meeting. The resident did express concerns with the impact of the development on the community, the size of the proposed patios, traffic, noise, and operation of the proposed inn. The subject lands are located or adjacent to commercial zone properties to the north and west of an additional permitted in land use will provide a transition from those commercial areas to the residential zoning to the south and to the east. The zoning bylaw requires 1 parking space for the inn plus 1 parking space per dwelling unit. The development would require 6 parking spaces, which have been shown on the conceptual site plan. The size of the existing building and the parking requirements of the zoning bylaw will limit the ability to expand the inn use of the property in the future. For traffic, the rezoning application to allow the inn will not significantly increase the amount of traffic on Milton Street. And the proposed reduced driveway width is still a suitable size to provide access to 6 parking spaces and allow vehicles to enter and exit from Milton Street in a safe and forward motion. Engineering Services have not expressed any concerns with the impact of traffic on Milton Street. In regards to noise and vibration from the CN lands, a duplex dwelling is permitted within the residential second density, and the existing land use has already been established. The proposed inn will be located within the existing building, and the rezoning application will not be introducing any new sensitive land use to the area. As the residential land use has already been established, planning staff do not feel a need for the completion of a noise and vibration study to allow the proposed inn. In regards to privacy and noise, the side yard setback requirement in the zoning bylaw is intended to provide privacy between adjacent property owners. Allowing a patio to be located within 1 meter of a side lot line could have a negative impact on the adjacent property. In order to alleviate some of those potential negative impacts, planning staff are recommending that the fence be provided from the rear property line to the front of the existing building to mitigate some of those impacts that the inn's patio may have on the adjacent property by reducing some of the noise and providing additional privacy for the adjacent property owner. The proposed zoning would not permit a restaurant or a liquor licensed establishment. Planning staff have reviewed the rezoning application and are of the opinion that the proposed zoning with additional planting, fence, and strip requirement along the east lot line would allow for a development that is considered to be appropriate for the development of the lands. In our opinion, the zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement, is in conforming with official plan provisions, and meets the intent of the zoning bylaw is consistent with the city's strategic priorities and represents good planning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm available to answer any other questions.
Just a reminder that Scott Patterson from Patterson Planning Consultant, agent for the applicant, is also available, I believe, for questions. So I open it up to council for questions. Councillor Bunting. You're still muted. There you go.
Through the chair, a question for staff. With regard to an inn, and I'm not familiar with all the rules and regulations, if there's no one on premise, is there a requirement for the owner to have a manager or some name or phone number of somebody local who would be able to attend if there was a problem? I'm thinking about Mr. McCabe's previous concerns.
For you, Mr. Chair, there is no requirement that a manager is located on site, or that it is owner occupied for an inn. We do have other similar situations in the city. There are several inns that are located within the city boundaries, and those have not been concerns that we've been hearing from our bylaw enforcement. We haven't been having issues with inns creating too much noise or nuisances for other property owners. So they would be treated the same as any other residential property, where if neighbors were creating too much noise or becoming unruly, that the city's police force would be the ones that would respond to that, those noise disturbances.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bunting. Councillor Sabat.
Thank you. Can I just clarify with Mr. Bannon that the R3 special, does that only allow for an inn, or would that also allow for like other R3 uses like a triplex, etc.?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That does allow for other uses that are allowed in the R3 zone. So it does allow for the inn, but it does allow for the other uses such as a triplex.
Thank you.
Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I'd like to ask staff, is there any restriction on the number of inns in an area? Like if someone else beside that house wanted to have an inn, as long as it's in the heritage area, is there any restriction on how many inns in a particular area?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, there are no restrictions on the number of inns that you could have in a certain area. Each property that asks for a rezoning application would be assessed on its own merits on each of those subject lands. What I can tell you is that the designation of this application does lead well to allowing it in that use as an additional permitted use. Inns typically aren't allowed in residential areas as a right, but because the property has the commercial designation for the downtown core, that's why we're considering it, and we do see that it is an area that would provide that transition from some of the commercial uses of the downtown core to some of those residential areas that are adjacent to it.
Councillor Seven, I see your hand.
Thank you. Just further to my previous question, is it a possibility to have to only allow for an inn with a zone change and not a triplex, or are they? I guess, is that a possibility?
Through the chair, that is always a possibility. That's not what was applied for by the applicant. So I would suggest that you would want them to weigh in on such a proposal before anything like that was decided. The concern with doing that is that you're going to stagnate the property to some degree. So if it is determined that the inn isn't viable for whatever reason, and especially living in the current times with the ongoing pandemic, if it can't operate successfully as an inn, a fallback position is to allow a less dense use such as the triplex, right? So if you allow the triplex on the property without having to make the applicant come back through a zone change application, you're still down to 3 units now, which is a less intensive use. And it's something that would be welcomed in that area, in my planning opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question, Counselor Seven? Counselor
That's
Henderson?
good. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? For either Mr. Patterson or Mr. Bannon? Seeing none. There is a motion, staff recommendation. Is there a mover for that? Counselor Ingram will move and Counselor Henderson will second. Discussion. Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Seeing none, and that's unanimous. Moving to item 4.2, planning report zoning bylaw amendment application Z04-21. And this is with respect to the address of 34 Brunswick Street. And I believe Ms. Nicole Cheva is on the line.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everybody. Thank you. I just want to share my presentation here. Is it visible for everybody?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. I will be presenting zoning amendment Z04-21 at 34 Brunswick, submitted by Lori Szymanski on behalf of Anthony Jordan. The requested amendment is to change the zoning of 34 Brunswick from a central commercial C3 zone to a central commercial C3 special zone to allow for a brew pub with the maximum floor area of 35% devoted to the production of beer. This was the site plan that was submitted with the application regarding that 35%. This was a photograph of the subject property from Street View taken on March 9th. The property is located on the north side of Brunswick Street between Downey Street and Waterloo Street South and has an approximate area of 465 meters squared and a lot frontage of 12.2 meters. The downtown core is a compact, multi-use and multifunctional area of the city with a range of land uses that are much broader than any other location in the city. This designation is intended to function as a central place for the community and provides access to goods and services for the residents of Stratford. The requested zone change contributes to the achievement of the downtown core goals of the official plan, as it will enhance and assist in maintaining a downtown which is vibrant and multifunctional. The proposed use also aligns with the types of uses permitted in this designation. The downtown core is an important employment area for retail, services, offices, and entertainment uses. It is actively promoting Stratford as a cultural tourism destination by enhancing economic strength and diversity. The proposed use contributes to the achievement of the economic development policies through providing opportunities for tourism and entertainment. The property is within the heritage area and the Heritage Conservation District, and the amendment does not raise any concerns as there will be no exterior changes to the building. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed use conforms with the official plan. The C3 zone permits a broad range of uses, including liquor license establishments and restaurants. This additional use of a brew pub will permit the production of beer on site and the sale of beer both on and off site. While the city's current zoning bylaw does not define brew pub, staff recommend the definition and associated regulations be utilized from the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw. Brew pub is defined there as a small scale brewery producing beer for sale on the premises or for distribution beyond the premises, with a maximum of 35% of the total floor area devoted to the production of beer. Planning staff are of the opinion that the site-specific zone change maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The application was circulated to various agencies and internal departments on March 18th, 2021. There have been no concerns raised through any of these comments. The notice of application was sent to 69 surrounding properties on March 18th as well. The notice was also included in the town crier published on March 27th. The public meeting was held on April 19th, and one public comment was received at the public meeting in support of the application. Planning staff are of the opinion that the site-specific zone change to add a brew pub as an additional use with a maximum of 35% of the total floor area devoted to the production of beer is appropriate for the use of the lands, as it will encourage further economic opportunities in the downtown core. This zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms with the official plan and the intent of the zoning bylaw, and is consistent with the city's strategic priorities, and finally represents good planning. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from council? Thank you for your presentation. Any questions? Seeing none, Councillor Gaffney.
I'll move the staff recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. A seconder for that. And Councillor Beatty, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. Thank you. Next item is motion to adjourn. Mover for that, Councillor Clifford and Councillor Burbach. All in favor? And that's unanimous, and we're adjourned. And I will turn the meeting over to Chair of Infrastructure, Councillor Basilakos. Floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll call the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll go item number 3. We do have some people speaking, but we'll cover them under item number 4, which is report of the Director of Infrastructure and Development Services. We did have an addenda for this section. The first being a motion that the correspondence from Patrick O'Rourke regarding the formalized design options for the TJ Dolan Drive multi-use trail be received. If I could get a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Ingram, seconded by Councillor Burbach. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And the next item is that the presentations by Dorothy Van Esbrook, Patrick O'Rourke, and Kirk Ryle be heard. Moved by Councillor Burbach, seconded by Councillor Ingram. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. So I guess first on the list would be Ms. Van Esbrook. If she's present, you please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Am I heard? Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I appreciate the city staff and council's creativity and willingness to examine different options for the portion of TJ Dolan Drive from St. David Street to Centre Street, especially given the tight timelines attached to the active transportation grant. The first section of TJ Dolan Drive from St. Vincent to St. David has been closed for 3 years now. To my knowledge, the section from St. David to Centre Street has never been closed. I view this section of TJ Dolan Drive from St. David to Centre as a city asset that needs to be fully appraised. It meets a variety of needs for a diverse group of users. One of the needs is as an extra parking area for visiting TJ Dolan Natural Area that has a main loop on each side of the river, resulting in hikes, mountain bikes, fat tire bikes, cross-country skis of up to 8 kilometers. You will find reviews on Google and All Trails, as well as bird sightings on eBird. It is also the location of some summer music concerts. The small parking lot off of John Street only holds about 10 cars. Having parking close by is not as essential for all users, but is especially important when carrying cross-country skis or snowshoes. If we close the portion of TJ Dolan Drive that is presently open, once it's gone, it's gone. It will be too expensive to get back. Just like we once had an opportunity for a multi-use trail in Stratford 20 or 30 years ago. We have the bridge to nowhere as a reminder. We can never get that potential rail trail back. I feel it might be more economical to maintain the road presently still open than to take away the road, only to realize its value and rebuild it once it's gone. How much are we saving by not having to make an additional parking lot to accommodate 20 to 30 cars for TJ Dolan Natural Area that are there on winter weekends? The cars are parked on both sides of TJ Dolan Drive. Large truck access will still be needed on the trail and road for tree pruning and access to the dam or weir. I am pleased to see some data in the staff report. One day, a midweek in May, does not give a true indication of the value of this road to the city. Through the chair, was the parking measured on both sides of the road? There is no column for parking St. David to Center Street, and maybe that can be answered afterwards. How long will this multi-use trail be? I'm guessing the portion from TJ Dolan Drive already closed is about 260 meters. The portion of the road in question is about 165 meters. Is this correct? Are we willing to spend $400,000 for about 425 meters of multi-use trail? For the cost conscious, that could be close to $1,000 per meter. How much did the multi-use trail cost on a loan per meter? Will this 425 meter multi-use trail significantly increase active transportation in Stratford? It doesn't seem to be part of a master plan or network. For example, when you cross over the bridge on St. Vincent Street and continue on TJ Dolan Drive to Huron Street, one has to walk or bike where there is no sidewalk or separation from traffic. Was there or are there any public meetings on the design of the multi-use trail? Right now, the existing pavement starting from St. Vincent Street seems in really good shape for about 16 meters. I would hate to see that pavement torn up. Maybe if the trail only goes from St. Vincent Street to St. David, the trail could be wider than 3 meters. This would allow a safe spot to ride side by side and have others walk side by side, as is the case now. Even though I use multi-use trails in Stratford and recognize the need for more, I feel adding this 165 meters of trail takes away easy access to 8 kilometers of other trails. I support allowing continued vehicle access from St. David to Center Street and maintaining this city's asset for the maximum number of diverse users, including those visiting TJ Dolan Natural Area. I sincerely request Council to direct staff to take no further action with the extension of the multi-use trail from St. David to Center Street, and that TJ Dolan Drive from St. David to Center Street remain open. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Van Esbroek? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, and I would ask that those questions be answered. If they could be answered.
So when we get to the part of the report, perhaps the staff member presenting the report can answer some of those questions.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So the next person speaking is Mr. O'Rourke. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I assume I'm being heard.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
I can thank you for this opportunity to speak. As I see option 3, basically proposes to tear up the existing asphalt of a working multi-use road with parking and then replace it with a much narrower multi-use trail. But doing so has consequences. Loss of parking leads to the proposal to put 5 parking spaces, which barely meets the minimum or the maximum number on a midweek, let alone the much greater use previous speaker referred to on weekends and at other times. And locate those parking spaces in what is at best an awkward and arguably unsafe location on 2 downward slopes. The idea is that anybody who can't park there will instead park on Center Street or St. David Street in residential areas with steep slopes. I guess I had understood that it was the city's view that residential parking as overflow should be discouraged, not created. The other question that the previous speaker referred to is whether this proposal will give the Conservation Authority adequate access to both replace and install and uninstall the baffles in the weir and to do other maintenance. It's worth noting none of the management reports refer at all to any comments from the Conservation Authority. I wonder if they were inadvertently left out. Proposal also means closing St. David and creating a roundabout. And I'm not a traffic engineer, but I do know the area. And what shows on those drawings is, I think, inadequate even for a snowplow to turn around. It could turn around. The northwest portion of that turnaround has a square corner, and it is, based on the drawings, less than a meter from the motor use trail. In winter, snow currently goes on the boulevard. The road's been moved. That snow will end up on the trail. And finally, there's nothing. The residents on St. David have expressed their concerns about having to back out or pull out onto a steep slope that will probably not be well maintained. Staff mentioned that there's a second priority on steep hills, but I also understand there's a very, very low priority on dead-end streets. So does this get plowed as a steep slope or as a dead-end street? I think the residents ought to at least know that, and so should council. So finally, I guess to sum, this proposal tears up paving, create an unneeded trail, then paves over green space on both ends, compensate for the loss of parking. Hardly see how this is even remotely an environmentally sound approach for the city to take, not to mention being an expenditure of funds that could better be used elsewhere. So like the previous speaker, I ask council to reject the proposal, leave TJ Dolan open, working, and used by, or it says, not an inconsiderable number of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. O'Rourke? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. O'Rourke. Our next speaker will be Mr. Ryle. Please go ahead. Mr. Ryle, please go ahead.
So through the chair, I do see that Mr. Reel's on the line and we are trying to connect him. Mr. Reel, you may need to press *6 in order to join the meeting. Through the chair, Mr. Reel, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
There you go. Oh, there we go. Okay, please go ahead.
So sorry for the technical I'm getting quite a feedback here on my phone. So I still would have to follow along with the fellow two speakers on the parking on TJ Dolan. I walked up there on Sunday, May the 16th, and there was 15 cars parked there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So it definitely is needed for parking for the TJ natural area. And my other concern goes to the roundabout on option 3. The turning radius of a dump truck and a garbage truck is 47 feet. And I can't see in the wintertime the ability for those trucks to turn around, given the load of snow that will be piled up there. So I can also see an increase in cost of the snow removal by dump truck and front end loader in order to facilitate turnarounds at the bottom of St. David Street Hill. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ryle. So now, are there any questions for Mr. Reel? Seeing none, we'll move on now to the staff report. And I guess, Mr. Krikla, will you be covering the staff report for us and the different options that were presented to us?
Yes, I will, and through the chair. At the May 10th ITS committee meeting, 3 conceptual design concepts were presented for the extension of the multi-use trail from St. David Street to Center Street. Based on the discussion, it was realized that it was difficult to make a decision regarding which design to proceed with without having an actual design and some numbers to show. So in the past couple of weeks, the engineering department prepared formalized drawings of the 2 preferred options, as well as did only 1 day of traffic and pedestrian counts with the time available. The formalized designs, I'd just like to say, are a good first draft, but there will be some adjustments required as we proceed with a finalized design if that's chosen. The 2 formalized designs are option 2, which is a one-way traffic and which maintains the existing road as it is and the installation of a multi-use trail. Option 3 is just the multi-use trail and the removal of the existing road from Center to St. David. So option 2, like I said, this is keeping the existing road as is and adding a multi-use trail just to the north. We will be adding, or would be adding a bit of, asphalt to provide better parking services for what's there. In terms of option 3, the existing road will be removed and the installation of a new multi-use trail. There would be a turnaround bulb at the end of St. David that are required to be installed. This design would introduce more green space overall to the area. However, there would be a loss of parking that we would anticipate to be recovered through St. David and Center Street. Just like to note again, there were pedestrian counts conducted for 1 day only, and that is only during daytime hours during the weekday during our current conditions. So there are more just to get an idea of what's out there. More counts would be needed to have a more firm response in that regards. In terms of funding, in the 2021 budget, there's $100,000 allocated for the multi-use trail up TJ Dolan. The city was also assigned approximately $350,000 through the OSIP, that's the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Ontario, for the TJ Dolan project. So effectively, if option 2 or option 3 is proceeded with, there is sufficient funding to fund this project. The one comment I will make in terms of option 2 is eventually that the road will deteriorate more, and at some point we would have to reconstruct the road due to its poor condition, and that would be an estimated cost of $200,000. And I guess if you like, I can answer some of the questions that were asked of those residents prior to the chair.
Are there any questions from council? I saw Councillor Bunting, Councillor Gaffney, Councillor Burback, and then Councillor Henderson.
Yes, through the chair. Thank you for that. Personally, option 3 is not an option for me anyways. Option 2 might be an option, or just leave it the way it is. And just do the one section from St. Vincent over to St. David. With respect to option 2, and I throw this out there, and I don't wish to be a fly in the ointment, but should the one-way traffic be instituted, to me it makes sense that the multi-use trail would then switch over to what is now the one-way, and the one-way would then go over to where the multi-use trail is. And if the one-way goes along in that particular route, then all the parking that exists on the hard shoulder that is there that can accommodate, as a previous speaker has spoke to, about 15 vehicles parked along there, then you've already got your parking along the side of the road, beside the river. So with a stop sign at the end to allow the multi-use trail to take preference, so pedestrians and cyclists can have the right of way, as it were. And then the road would go across and go along that way. Would there be a consideration of that? Does that make sense? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? I mean,
I was just gonna say, would that require 2 crossings over though? So for the director, but would that require 2 crossings over to go? If that one way then has to turn left, then you have to cross that pedestrian twice? That's my question, but maybe the director can answer your question.
Right, through the chair. Based on the design, there would be 2 crossings of the multi-use trail over the existing TJ Dolan Drive. The one comment I will mention, and part of the reason why we have it, the orientation that we do, is to reconstruct a road is much more costly as it is just to leave TJ Dolan in the condition that it currently is. The design required for multi-use trail is different than what would be required for the road itself. So it could work, but it'd probably be more money required to make that happen.
So Councillor Gaffney, I think you're next, and Councillor Burback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm gonna move option number 3.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Burback. Councillor Burback, go ahead and comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I do support having a connected multi-use trail from St. Vincent all the way to Center Street for a couple of important reasons. The first one is that there is a lot of student traffic in that area. This is an important and safe route to school for students who are attending the Stratford Intermediate School, which is formerly known as Stratford Central. So while I appreciate that the traffic count was done recently, it did not capture any student travel data because it was done during a pandemic shutdown when students are learning from home online. So my 3 children attended Central for 6 of the past 8 years. I live close to this area, so I can report anecdotally that the TJ Dolan Drive is used daily as a route to school by students who walk and students who bike to school when school is in session. So my concern, if we leave things the way they are and we don't extend the trail to Center Street, I have concerns for both safety and for winter pedestrian access. So the multi-use trail from St. Vincent to St. David will presumably be a priority for sidewalk plowing route, considering it's a route to school. So one of our sidewalk plows would be clearing it. Once the students get to St. David, then it's a secondary plow route. So it could be a day or 2 later that section of the trail, well, if it's a road, will be plowed. So all of a sudden, a route that was going to be nicely plowed all the way through to John Street, basically, will no longer be as easily accessible. There's also the consideration of safety. It's well supported by research that keeping pedestrians and cyclists separated from vehicle traffic is important for safety. And I think we can all appreciate that students between the age of 11 and 14 may not be the best at safely sharing the road with vehicles, especially when there's parked cars along the side and you have bicycles. So a multi-use path would actually ensure that there's a safe and maintained route from the northwest side of the city, and it would help avoid conflicts between traveling and parked vehicles and pedestrians and cyclists. A secondary but important reason to connect the multi-use path with the TJ Dolan natural area is to encourage and develop cycle tourism, which I discussed previous today. It is really important to have those connected routes. So if a cycle tourist is looking at a map of Stratford and they see just a tiny piece of infrastructure here and a tiny piece there and a little piece here, and they have to dodge through parked cars and so on, that's not really as attractive to people who are coming for tourism. It's also not attractive for the many people who are cyclists and pedestrians in our area that we would have to sort of dodge around parked cars, doors being opened and so on. It's dangerous for cyclists. So those would be my 2 arguments for having a multi-use trail. I do prefer option 3, but I also think that option 2 should be considered. I've had several emails from people who really would like a trail, but they would also like to maintain the parking. So if option 3 is not carried, I would like to propose that we move forward with option 2. Then we're accommodating parking and we're getting a multi-use trail that's connected. I should also point out that John Street is a assigned cycling route. So for students and for other cyclists coming down John Street, it's a really great place to avoid going over the John Street Bridge because that bridge is extremely narrow. It's not great for cyclists, and even for pedestrians on the one side, there is no sidewalk. So I do think that for safety reasons, it is important to extend that multi-use trail. And then as we all received the email from Ms. Merkel, she was supporting option 2, and she also suggested that we might consider putting in a pedestrian crossing at some point across John Street to make sure that we have safe crossing in that area through to the TJ Dolan natural area. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, you're next.
I have a couple things. In your drawing, it shows parking between the road and the multi-use trail. How many cars would you get along there? 2? Like, it doesn't look like it's very long.
Through the chair, I assume you're referring to option 2.
Yes.
The parking actually would remain the same as it is today. So effectively, you wouldn't lose from what you have. It's just reestablishing what's there.
You mean they can park all the way almost from the corner all the way back to St. David Street?
We aren't removing any asphalt, so any asphalt that is there, sorry, through the chair, we are effectively buffing up some of the existing asphalt. So what's there today is what should be there tomorrow plus some.
Because currently they park on both sides of the road. I just can't see, if you're only going to have one place to park, how many spots it will actually be. And while you're looking at that, my second question is, when we make a road one way and we have a multi-use trail on it, are you allowed to go both ways with your bicycle on it?
To the chair, on the Highway Traffic Act, the bicycle would be a vehicle and that would be illegal to go the wrong way on the one-way street.
So they could only come home from school that way. They wouldn't be able to go to school that way.
The multi-use trail is bi-directional. If the cyclist chooses to be on the road, they have to go one way. If the cyclist is on the multi-use trail, it's bi-directional. They can go in each direction.
I thought Mr. Crinkwaller just said that it wasn't that way.
Want to clarify, Mr. Crickwell?
Sorry, through the chair. I was referring to the one-way street portion for vehicle access, not the multi-use trail.
So it is, the multi-use trail is, you can go both ways on it.
Correct.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to be registering that I will not be supporting option 3 because I've heard, I know there's only 2 residence houses on St. David Street, but I drove down there and that hill is quite steep. And I'm questioning if people that live on St. David Street that are partway up the hill have trouble getting up the hill, like heading east, how a big tractor, this, or what do we call them, snowplow, is going to go down there, turn around and come back up. Aren't they going to have trouble? And or how will that work? Because if we're blocking that off so cars can't go through, how does the multi-use trail go through on option 3? Because the snowplow has to go along there and keep the multi-use trails open. And I'm assuming if say it was option 3, it would probably be on the low bottom to get plowed, or how does that work? That's a whole bunch of questions, I know, but.
Any comments?
Yeah, through the chair, I'll answer to the best of my ability. I guess we'll start off with the plowing of St. David Road. So we already had discussions with the manager of Public Works, and he indicated that effectively you start by going down the hill, so you already have a cleared section. So there would be already a cleared surface, for lack of better words. And there are other areas in the city that have similar inclines and they're able to make it work. So I'm not worried from that respect. In terms of parking on the one-way street for TJ Dolan, effectively the paved surface is there today will be the paved surface that is there tomorrow. So how it functions today will effectively how it will function tomorrow. So if people are parking on both sides, technically there wouldn't be any limitation to that. It would be on the gravel or grass surface for that matter. It might not be the most ideal situation, and that's why we're beefing up the asphalt on the north side. What next, other questions?
Before you leave that, when I look at the drawing, it looks like the multi-use trail is running along the north side, which is where they used to park. Is that not right?
Will they not? But now they will park on the asphalt because it's a one-way street, so it allows a full lane of like paved parking. And they still have the option of parking on the other side like they do now. So I think that's what Mr. Krikla is pointing out, that it functions the same way now.
So you're going to have multi-use trail, parking, one-way road, and possibly parking.
Yes. I'm going to move on. Yeah, I'm going to move on to Councillor Seven and then Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, he's going to finish my other one. How do you, if you went with option 3 and you made a cul-de-sac at the bottom, how do you plow from John Street all the way to St. Vincent Street on TJ Dolan then? Isn't there cement up there or something on the cul-de-sac part?
To the chair, I'm not sure if I understand your question, sorry.
Okay, so in option 3, you come down, there's a cul-de-sac at the bottom of St. David Street, right? So now that's effectively blocked off, so somebody can't drive their car that way to go up the hill. So if you're going to be plowing the multi-use trail from John Street to St. Vincent or the other way around, whichever way you do it, because my understanding is that trail is going to be kept open in the winter. How do you get through where that cul-de-sac is now? Because that'll be a cement wall, I'm assuming, like a curb.
I'm not sure. Would it not just, sorry, like the director could go ahead, but wouldn't you just start at one end and clear it all the way along? Why would you need to do it?
There's a cul-de-sac there, blocking the trail, blocking the road.
But you can access the trail from both ends.
But there's a cul-de-sac in the middle of it. How do you get past it? Because that's all cement, stop people from going.
There isn't a cul-de-sac blocking the multi-use trail. The multi-use trail goes directly from John Street all the way through.
Well, what stops cars from driving down there then?
Maybe the director could answer.
Through the chair, I believe bollards are closed to inhibit vehicles from accessing that area, but effectively that would be the only infrastructure in place for it.
Okay, so I'm going to move on because Councillor Seven's been waiting, then Councillor Gaffney, then Councillor Burbach, then Councillor Clifford.
Thank you. So first, I'm pretty sure, I just wanted to clarify. Sorry, I'm getting feedback, but we are talking, Councillor Gaffney's motion is for option 3, not the third option on the agenda. Is that correct? Like we're talking about option 3 in the drawings, not the third option.
Yes, the option that corresponds with the drawings provided.
Okay, thank you. And so I just wanted to comment. I would prefer to see no changes made to TJ Dolan. I feel will restrict the use for those people who live further or who aren't able to walk or bike to the trail. I'm opposed to option 3 because I feel we're going to inadvertently decrease use by decreasing traffic. Not everybody is able to, for a variety of reasons, to get to the trail other than driving there. And you know, I don't support option 2 either, simply because of the cost for either of the options, but also it's been functioning well, and it functions well now, and it has always quite well, and I don't think you know, and the comment about children going to school through that route, I think there might be some, but I think it's sort of, I just don't see adding a piece of multi-use trail as being a huge draw when, you know, I was biking down there the other day. You just sort of drive down the road like you do on, I mean, 50% of the master plan for active transportation, the pedestrian and cycling plan, it's 50% of it is biking on the road. So I don't see why we should be spending all this money on as one of the speakers mentioned, a small portion of multi-use trail. I think having that little piece of trail, it still doesn't really go anywhere. It still sort of ends up on St. Vincent Street, and then you're sort of left there. So I think for the resources that it'll take to make this happen, I think if we were in a different scenario, it would be more appealing, but I just don't see we're there at this point, and so I don't support changing anything in TJ Dolan.
I believe it was Councillor Burbach, then Councillor Gaffney, Burbach, Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if we go with option number 2, then are we going to revisit the stub of TJ Dolan between St. David and St. Vincent? And I don't agree that it ends at St. Vincent. You cross St. Vincent, you walk through the park behind Central High School, down to Shakespeare Gardens, down York Street, and you're into the park. So to say that this is somehow some sort of orphan piece of trail that we're going to have next to John Street is absolutely ridiculous. We want to have some sort of continuous trail, and here's an opportunity to have a trail go right from Romeo Street to the TJ Dolan natural area to Ohlone Ave. But we want to put traffic in there. We want to keep traffic in there just because that's convenient for a few people on St. David. Let's get serious here. We want to have a trail go from one end of the city to the other, and here's an opportunity to have one. But we've got to have traffic through there. We got to have our kids going to the schools competing with cars on that piece. You know, let's get serious. Let's do a serious trail here. My apologies, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Burbach, Councillor Clifford.
Thank you. And thank you to Councillor Gaffney for his comments. I wholeheartedly agree. Just a couple things I was going to comment on. Councillor Henderson, for option 3, I think it was a little confusing to see if there's pedestrians or cyclists, how they would join up with the multi-use trail. And I think the last time we discussed it, I did ask if there would be an option for at the end of St. David, if we did go with option 3, that it would be connected through with a small trail to join up with the multi-use trail. So I think maybe that's what you're asking. I don't know. The other piece of it is for plowing, my understanding, and maybe the director can correct me if I'm wrong, but once it becomes a multi-use path, it will be plowed by sidewalk plows. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. So, and then it would have a different priority level than it currently has as a road. So it would be plowed sooner. My third point is this is costing us money, but we have the majority of it will be provided through the grant that we have. So and we had set aside 100,000, and the total amounts of money, if we get the grant, is 450,000, which leaves 50,000 of our money that still remains in our pocket. And I would suggest maybe in the future we look into perhaps the separated bike lanes on Romeo could use the $50,000 to get that project started. So just food for thought there.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, I would like to ask our director, we've heard concerns about the turnaround at St. David. Is that turnaround going to be okay for fire trucks, for plows, and whatever? I'd like an answer to that question. Then I have a second question.
Yes, through the chair. Okay, so I reached out to the fire department just recently to get that confirmation, and they can provide sufficient fire services to that street if it has a cul-de-sac, which would not be able to turn around. The cul-de-sac or the bulb that you see down there is a draft, first draft. We are able to navigate recycling trucks for sure. That's the template that we used. We anticipate modifying it when we come to finalize the design to provide the most effective turnaround space possible, just so it's easier for any future vehicle down the road.
Thank you. My other question is, I believe you talked about if we do go with option 2, we would have to repair that road and the approximate cost would be $200,000. My question is, how soon would we have to do that? And are there other streets that are a lot higher priority than that street to spend $200,000 on?
Yes, to the chair. Similar to the section that was closed recently, eventually it will deteriorate to the point where it either needs to be closed or reconstructed. The exact timeline, I can't tell you for sure, but it wouldn't be too many years down the road given the use that it gets. But effectively the road is fully deteriorated, so it would require full reconstruction to put it into a current city standard.
Any other questions? Councillor Seven?
Thank you. So I don't want to split hairs, but I would be remiss not to address Councillor Gaffney's comments here. So if this multi-use trail existed today as being proposed in option 3, you would come to St. Vincent Street and be faced with either a choice of biking or walking on a road the same as TJ Dolan, or cutting through the back of the school property and ending up in Shakespeare Gardens, where the only accessible way to exit there is to go through the Service Ontario parking lot. You can't get around, there's no controlled pedestrian crossing unless you go all the way up to Erie Street. It's impossible to cross from the parking lot that you would end up in. So the only way, unless you're going on school property and then to a parking lot, is to go on a road that is the exact same as TJ Dolan. So I think to say that this would complete some sort of trail system we have is just not true. So I just find that very hard to understand. So either provide some clarification on what is a trail if I'm missing a trail, but I think there isn't one there.
So I did have Councillor Burback and then Councillor Gaffney, and then I had a couple comments as well. Go ahead, Councillor Burback.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to respond. When you walk through the school field, you can actually walk through Shakespeare Gardens and you can go under Huron as a pedestrian. You can't do it as a cyclist, but certainly for a pedestrian route, you can avoid any crossings once you get across St. Vincent Street.
Councillor Gaffney?
Thanks, Councillor Burback. That was what I was going to say.
So my comment around that is there are lots of areas in our park system that could use improvements in accessibility, and we can improve that trail, but not having perfect accessibility through our park system now is something we should be working on, but I don't know that it precludes doing something here. That one of the advantages that I see of adding a multi-use trail is it separates cyclists, it separates pedestrians, but it also separates people using assistive devices and gets them off of the road and onto a multi-use trail. And so whether it's option 3, or option 3 does remove the driving part of it, but I think any opportunity we're given grant money and not spending a whole lot of our own money to separate pedestrians and cyclists from traffic is a really good opportunity. And so I will leave it at that. Do we have any other comments before I call the question on this, which is option 3 in the drawings? Any other questions or comments? Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor of option 3? Opposed? Okay, so that's defeated. So I'll open the floor to any other. Councillor Burbach.
I'd like to make the motion to go ahead with option 2, please.
Okay, Councillor Henderson, are you seconding that? Okay, do we need any additional discussion on option 2? Councillor Sutton? And then
I think ideally, I would like to see us have more observation of the traffic that is in that area before we proceed with option 2. So I don't know if that would entail a referral motion until we have more data on the traffic and the parking that takes place.
Councillor Henderson?
Yes. I actually asked Mr. Crinkwell if he could do a bit of a study there, just so we'd have a bit of a feedback. And it was very short notice, and it takes quite a bit of time to go out and do one all day long. So at least we got a little bit of data to go by, which was really gratefully received. I think option 2 is a nice compromise. It still keeps the traffic that the people that live on St. David, that idea, have come down that way along the trail. And it still extends the multi-use trail, so it makes it safer. I foresee that you're probably going to still have people that go the wrong way down there to park, but it'll be interesting to see if they're going to go up center and come around down to park. But I think it's a nice compromise.
So Councillor Sutton?
Would it be appropriate to make a referral motion so we could have some more information just to make sure that we have adequate parking? Should we move ahead?
You are welcome to make either a deferral or a referral motion and see if you can get a seconder for it. I don't know what it's appropriate for any councillor to make any motion they choose.
Sure. So I'd like a deferral motion until we have, I'll make a deferral motion until we have just information to make sure that we will have adequate parking with the change for option 2.
Do I get a seconder for that? Sorry, Councillor Gaffney, are you seconding? So we do have, it's a deferral motion. So Councillor Burke and Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I just like to make a comment, or actually ask a question. I think the Director of Infrastructure just told us that if we went with option 2, that all the parking spots that are currently there will remain. Is that correct information, Mr. Crinkwell?
That's correct.
So I don't see why we need a study, because we know that what's existing will remain. So it's just, I don't think it's worth staff time to go back to come back to us to tell us the same answer.
And okay, so I'll just so there is a deferral motion on the floor. All in favor of the deferral? That's one. All opposed? And the deferral motion is defeated. So now I'll go back. Are there any other comments on question 2 before I can call the question? Seeing none, all in favor of option 2? That's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. So the only thing left on the agenda is adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ingram, seconded by Councillor Clifford. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. Madam Clerk, reconvene.
For you, Deputy Mayor, returning to your agenda, item 15.1, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest made at standing committee to be restated at the reconvene portion?
Seeing none.
Item 15.2 is reading of the bylaws, and there is one final bylaw listed for consideration, and that is the confirmatory bylaw, and it requires first and second reading first.
Thank you. And that's moved by Councillor Burbach and Councillor Ingram. All in favor? Thank you. And that's unanimous. And third and final, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Bunting. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And your last item is motion to adjourn. And that's Councillor Clifford and Councillor Seven. All in favor? Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Stay safe, everyone.